Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and with Command & Conquer Rivals global launch, a lot of people have been asking me, posting on the subreddit, posting on the Discord, talking to other content creators about what decks they should be playing to climb at the lower levels. So I thought I'd take some time today and build 4 different decks, 2 for GDI and 2 for NOD, that should help you get to grips with some core fundamentals of the game. Learning these decks will teach you a lot of things about the game to help you get to a level where you feel comfortable playing versus anybody. Now, it can be quite confusing when you come in. There's lots of units to select. A lot of people like to play the big shiny units, the big tech units, and it can be a bit confusing about where you should be spending your time and effort. And as you climb through the different ranks, you'll have access to different units, and that'll make you more interested in trying different units out. And definitely you sometimes might find that you have favorite units. I'm going to assume for GDI, and I'll assume the same for NOD, that you are level 15 and under. That means you're going to have access to Strong Arm, Liang, the 2 commanders. You'll have access to Riflemen, Missiles, Shockwaves, and Jump Jets, hopefully. You might not have access to all of these, of course. You'll have access, hopefully, to the Drones, the Talon, and the Orca. You'll have access to the Pitbull, the Rhino, and the Predator. And then you'll have access to various tech units, not limited to, but including the Wolverine, Zone Trooper, Sandstorm, and Titan. Now, you obviously, like I said, won't have access to all of these. You might have access to individual specific ones, but when I talk about the decks, I'm also going to talk about what you can replace certain cards with, so you hopefully find something that works for you. The first deck that I'd like to talk about is what I like to call the aggro GDI deck, although I didn't really make the name up. It's kind of just what the purpose of the deck is designed to do. Now, at this level, you're not going to have access to all the units that some of the high-level players use in this deck. For instance, you might notice that some high-level players on the leaderboard run snipers instead of shockwave troopers, and you won't have access to that right now, but that's fine, you don't need them. Lieutenant Strongarm is a great commander for this deck because she excels at early game pressure, as well as controlling the map and controlling choke points. You can sub in the Rhino for any of your vehicles if you see fit. You could also be more aggressive and sub it in for your Riflemen. And although Talon I feel is best in the slot, you can sub it in for Drones or Orca if you prefer them, or even one of your tech units if that is what you think is going to work for you. We're going to have a look at a high-elo game between eWizzle and Gasti. Gasti is actually one of the developers of this game. eWizzle is using the deck on the bottom left-hand side, and you can see running a very similar setup to what we had, except for the fact he is running snipers over those shockwave troopers. Now, the point of this deck is to take the first missile. He's actually against another aggressive GDI deck, so they'll both be heavily contesting that first missile. And once you put that first missile down, you can see that he immediately went to pressure the opponent's harvester. This does 2 things. A, makes the opponent have to think about the second missile because they've already lost the first, but they also want to respond to their economy being pressured, so they have to defend their harvester, meaning that you get a bit more of a foothold on the map. Against aggressive decks, this might be harder to pull off, like you can see in this particular game, but if you're going up against a deck that is trying to get out tech units and you pressure their harvester after the first missile capture, they might find themselves in a position where they never actually get a tech unit out and are constantly having to respond with units that don't match up in the early game as well as yours do. So the overall point of this deck is to get that first missile, pressure the opponent's Tiberium Harvester or their base, and then capture the second missile because they are unable to respond with what their deck is designed to do. Alright, we're going to have a look at a different deck. This one actually has got some tech units in, and this is a slight variant of what I am using right now at higher elo. Now, Dr. Liang does work in this deck, but you can just as equally use Lieutenant Strongarm. You drop the Rifleman and have a core infantry base of the missiles and the shockwaves, and then you can go Pitbull and Predator for the mid game, or you can take out the Predator tank for the jump jet troopers like I do, or you can add in your Orca or your Rhino depending on what you're facing up against. When you have tech units, I always recommend that you pair tech units that they do different things and they also complement each other. Wolverine Titan is a classic combo, but Wolverine Sandstorm and Wolverine Zone Troopers works just as well. Let's take a look at a game that I played recently. Now, I run a deck very similar to the one that I listed in the video, except for that I run Jackson instead of Lieutenant Strongarm. But realistically, to be honest, both of them are fine. I just prefer the way that Jackson plays. It comes down to personal playstyle. Now, I lost the first missile. I wasn't able to cope with the drone pressure here, but that doesn't matter. The only point of my deck is to be able to find a space where I'm safe enough to put out a double harvester without getting pressured too heavily by my opponent. That's why I delay my double harvester. I don't usually throw it out right away. And then I wait for a tech lab. I can get the tech lab so I can immediately start pumping out the Wolverines and the Titans. The great thing about Wolverine's Titans is that they basically deal with pretty much anything in the game. Wolverine is excellent versus infantry and pretty decent versus air, and Titans absolutely decimate vehicles, so if they have any heavy vehicle presence, you know that you're going to be able to deal with them. The point of this double harvester deck is to be able to get to Tech Lab and constantly have the Tiberium income to put out these big hitting units. It is much better with double harvester, so I wouldn't recommend running this on single harvester, and I would stick to the GDI aggro deck until you unlock double harvester. Right, we're going to have a look at NOD now, and I'm going to assume you're level 15 and under, which means you'll have access to Seth and Kane as commanders, militants, laser troopers, flame troopers, and then also the Venom and the Banshee. You should also have access to an array of vehicles, including the buggy, the attack bikes, the Scorpion, and the tick tank. And the tech units involve the Flame Tank, the Widowmaker, the Rockworm, and the Cyborg. Of course, you will not have access to all of these, but again, I'm going to show you some different variations of decks and where you can make substitutes depending on what you have and depending on the level of your units. We're going to take a look at the NOD variant of the aggro deck now. And this is something that I actually played almost all the way to Tiberium League. I actually played it till Master, and then I eventually changed in Master to a Jade deck, which I'll talk about in a later video. Now, you can play this with Kane or Seth, both of them work perfectly fine. I prefer Kane because he has great second missile control with the Obelisk versus vehicle units, but Seth is also very good. You can run the deck that you see at the top, but you can make a couple of substitutions as well. You can sub out the Militants for the Banshee so that you have the Venom Banshee combo. You can sub out the Venom totally for the Banshee, and you can also throw the Buggy in for the Militants as well. If you have a really high level tick tank, you might want to run that instead of the Scorpion. It's a little bit more expensive, but can give you great zone control. But the deck that you see at the top listed is also very fine. We're going to have a look at Kane Official playing a Seth variant of this deck where he runs the Banshee instead of the Venom and also runs a Buggy instead of the Militants. Again, this deck is all about first missile control. You should really be aiming to get first missile absolutely as a priority versus almost any opponent. If you get first missile, like I said, in the GDI aggro deck, it puts pressure on your opponent. Look at how both our GDI and our NOD players, as soon as they take that first missile, they throw something at the enemy harvester to try and pressure it. Even forcing him to move his harvester causes him to delay Tiberian income for a small amount of time. And then it is a simple game of cat and mouse and rock, paper, scissors, just trying to constantly pump out counters to your opponent. Because he is against another aggro deck, it's not unusual to lose the second missile, but again it now comes down to constant pressure versus your opponent, trying to make sure that you are the one in control of these missile points when it matters most. And again, once you get that core concept down of taking the first missile with an aggro deck, then transferring that into pressure on your opponent, especially versus a tech-heavy deck, you're almost certainly going to come out victorious a lot of the time. Now, I'm also going to give you a tech variant of a NOD deck. NOD does not have many good tech units in the early game. I'll be completely honest with you guys, NOD is not a great tech lab variant. They don't have too many good units up there. I'm going to show you this deck though, and again, it can be played with both commanders, though I would recommend Kane. And this is core of missiles and flame troopers, but you could add packages of the Venom and the Banshee if you wanted to. And I really like the combo of Widowmakers and Cyborgs because they combat a lot of what the GDI guys might throw at you. Now, I actually think Widowmakers are better than flame tanks in most aspects, but if you want to add a flame tank in there, you can, especially if you've got a high level one. We're going to watch a guy called Justin M. Kohler, he's from my alliance, and he is running a deck that you can see in the bottom left. Widowmaker Cyborg combats at the top level, running a big package of infantry to control the early game, and also running attack bikes for a bit of mid-game anti-air and pressure on the opponent. Now, he went double harvester very early on here, which means he's immediately able to go for those Widowmakers. Considering the opponent has got a very mid-game GDI deck, he does not have the tech in it to deal with the tech units coming out from this NOD guy, as well as the Obelisk of Light being really powerful versus things like Predator tanks and Pitbulls. Cyborgs eventually come out, and Cyborgs will eat these vehicles alive, a bit like the Titan on the GDI side of things, but with higher DPS. And honestly, at this point, there's nothing that this guy could do because he was not able to pressure that double harvester early on, which allowed him to get to those tech unit combos really, really easily. Again, when you're running tech combos, it's better to have access to double harvester because that increased Tiberium income is really important to be able to afford those tech units on a regular basis. Hope you enjoyed that, guys, and I hope some of those decks give you some ideas about what you can climb with. Again, I know unit levels can be frustrating, but really work on your micro and you can outplay people to a large extent in this game. I'll see you soon.